Please help me to reach 7,000 subscribers. Madison Clark shivered as the November wind cut through the empty streets of Manhattan. The city lights flickered, reflecting off puddles from last night's rain, but they offered no warmth. She pulled her worn coat tighter around her, her thin scarf doing little to shield her from the cold. Each step echoed against the concrete, a painful reminder of the emptiness that had settled into her life. It hadn't always been this way. Once she had a home filled with laughter and plans for the future. But that life had slipped through her fingers. Her husband, once a voice of comfort, had abandoned her, citing reasons that left her raw and broken. Infertility, he had said, a word that now felt like a scar etched deep into her soul. She had tried to understand, to forgive, to hold on. But each rejection, each cold glance from him had chipped away at her, leaving her hollow. The city didn't care. People brushed past her, faces buried in their own worlds, earbuds in, coffee cups in hand, oblivious to the woman whose knees knocked in the shadows. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, but it wasn't just physical. It was the ache of loss, the emptiness of being unseen, of being discarded. She thought of the locket around her neck, her mother's last gift, tarnished now, its chain barely holding. Inside was a photo of her family before everything fell apart. The sight of it brought tears that she quickly wiped away, fearing anyone who might see her vulnerability. She remembered the nights she had cried herself to sleep on the cold floor of their apartment, the silence so heavy it pressed against her chest. Dreams of being loved, of belonging, had become nightmares of abandonment. Madison had tried to reach out to friends, but one by one they drifted away, unable or unwilling to carry the weight of her pain. The city's vastness mirrored the emptiness inside her, a canyon with no echo, no answer, no comfort. Her legs ached from wandering aimlessly, but she couldn't stop. Stopping meant facing the memories, the loneliness, the failure. She ducked into an alley to catch her breath, pressing her back against the damp brick wall. The cold seeped through her coat, chilling her bones. She hugged herself tightly, rocking slightly, trying to make herself small, invisible. The sound of distant traffic and a siren wailing somewhere downtown reminded her she was alone in a world that moved on without her. Every shadow seemed to whisper reminders of what she had lost. Madison's mind replayed conversations, harsh words, and promises broken. The life she had envisioned, filled with warmth and love, had been replaced by empty apartments, cold nights, and silence that screamed. She thought of the career she had abandoned, the friends who had moved on, the dreams that had died quietly, unnoticed. Her reflection in a puddle showed a woman worn thin by life, with hollow eyes that had seen too much pain too soon. Yet amidst the despair, a small ember of something stubborn flickered inside her. Survival. Not hope, not yet, but survival. Madison had learned that even in the darkest nights, she could keep walking, keep breathing, keep hiding from the world that had abandoned her. Each step was an act of defiance against the despair threatening to swallow her whole. Each breath reminded her that she was still here, still fighting, even when it felt pointless. She stumbled upon a small, deserted park, the swings moving slightly in the gusts of wind. Memories of childhood laughter, their innocence, their simplicity, hit her like a wave. Madison sank onto a cold bench, the metal biting through her coat. She hugged her knees, burying her face against them, letting silent tears fall freely. The world moved on, indifferent to her pain, but for the first time in hours, she allowed herself to feel it fully. To acknowledge that she was broken, that she was lost, that she was human. Her thoughts drifted to what tomorrow might bring. Fear clung to her like the chill in the air, but she also felt something unfamiliar, a quiet curiosity. Perhaps the city still held possibilities. Perhaps someone somewhere might see her, might reach out. She didn't know how or when, but the faintest trace of wonder threaded through the sorrow, fragile yet undeniable. Madison pulled the locket from under her coat, staring at the picture inside. A soft, almost imperceptible whisper escaped her lips. "I'll keep going, somehow." Night deepened, and the city lights cast long, lonely shadows across the streets. Madison stood slowly, brushing the damp from her coat, adjusting the scarf around her neck. Her eyes, red from tears, scanned the horizon. Somewhere ahead, the streets curved and twisted, promising nothing and everything all at once. With one last shiver, she stepped forward into the unknown, carrying her pain and her stubborn ember of survival, unaware that life was about to test her resilience in ways she could never have imagined. Madison had been wandering the city streets for what felt like hours when she stumbled upon a small, dimly lit coffee shop tucked between two towering office buildings. The sign above flickered intermittently, casting a warm amber glow onto the wet sidewalk. She hesitated for a moment, unsure if she should enter. But the biting wind and the promise of warmth drew her in. The bell above the door jingled as she stepped inside, and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee wrapped around her like a comforting embrace. The interior was cozy, filled with mismatched wooden tables and shelves lined with worn books. A few patrons lingered quietly, immersed in laptops or hushed conversations. Madison took a seat at a corner table, her coat still damp, scarf hanging loosely around her neck. As she sipped the steaming coffee, she noticed someone watching her from across the room. A man in his mid-30s with sharp features softened by a gentle smile approached cautiously. He had a professional yet approachable appearance, wearing a tailored jacket over a casual shirt. His name was Daniel, though she wouldn't know that yet. He asked if he could share her table, noticing the scarcity of empty seats. Hesitant but too cold to refuse, Madison nodded. Conversation started awkwardly. Small talk about the weather, the city, the coffee. Yet Daniel's genuine curiosity and soft-spoken nature slowly drew her out of her shell. He didn't press for details about her life, didn't pry. He listened, truly listened, and in that simple act, Madison felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: connection. As the evening progressed, they shared stories of their lives, the kind that only strangers can reveal safely. Madison spoke carefully at first, revealing fragments of her past, the heartbreak, the loss, the emptiness. Daniel shared too, but in small doses, hinting at his own struggles and vulnerabilities. There was a rhythm to their exchange, a delicate balance of trust and curiosity. The world outside, with its harsh lights and roaring traffic, seemed to fade away. At one point, Madison laughed, a soft, almost hesitant sound. It startled her the way it bubbled up from a place long dormant. Daniel smiled, nodding appreciatively, as if acknowledging the significance of that tiny sound. It was a moment of lightness, fragile yet undeniable, cutting through the layers of despair she had been carrying for months. She realized how starved she had been for genuine human interaction, for someone who saw her beyond her pain. The coffee shop began to empty, the night deepening outside the windows. Madison felt a reluctant pang as she noticed the time. She didn't want the evening to end, but reality loomed. A cold apartment, empty streets, the silence waiting for her. Daniel seemed to sense her hesitation, offering a small, reassuring smile. He suggested a walk, just a short one, to help her warm up before heading back into the city's harsh embrace. They stepped outside, the night air still sharp, but somehow less unbearable than before. Madison noticed the way Daniel's presence seemed to anchor her, giving her a small sense of security in a city that had long felt indifferent. They walked side by side, navigating the puddles and the scattered leaves, exchanging observations about the city, the flickering streetlights, the distant hum of traffic, the soft chatter from late-night diners. At one point, Daniel stopped and gestured to a small park illuminated by a single lamppost. He asked her to look around to take in the moment. Madison did, her chest tightening as she realized she was allowing herself to feel again, not just the pain, but the subtle, tender possibility of hope. It was disorienting, unfamiliar, yet strangely comforting. The ember she had carried alone through the night seemed to flicker brighter, fed by a warmth she hadn't expected. Their conversation took a more personal turn, though still cautious. Daniel spoke of dreams deferred, of moments lost, of lessons learned the hard way. Madison listened, relating to the pain hidden behind his careful words. There was an unspoken understanding between them, a recognition that both had been wounded by life but were still willing to step forward, even if tentatively. When the walk came to an end, Madison felt an unexpected reluctance to part ways. She realized that in just a few hours, she had experienced something she hadn't in a long time, a genuine human connection, a brief reprieve from the solitude that had defined her existence. Daniel offered a simple, sincere invitation to meet again, no pressure, just a possibility. Madison nodded, a small but genuine smile breaking through her weary expression. As she watched him walk away into the shadows of the city, Madison felt a strange mix of emotions: hope, curiosity, and cautious optimism. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to imagine a future that wasn't just survival, but one that might hold unexpected encounters, small joys, and the chance to rebuild something meaningful. Returning to her apartment that night, Madison carried with her a subtle but undeniable change. The despair that had dominated her world was still there, but it no longer felt insurmountable. There was a crack, a window, a small space where light could enter. She placed her empty coffee cup on the counter, her fingers lingering on the warm ceramic, and whispered to herself, "Maybe it's not too late." Madison walked into her small apartment, the dim light casting long shadows across the modest furnishings. The city's chaos seemed miles away, but the weight of the day still clung to her like a second skin. She sank onto the couch, tugging her damp scarf closer around her neck, feeling the exhaustion seep deep into her bones. The encounter at the coffee shop still lingered, the warmth of the conversation with Daniel echoing in her mind. For a moment, she allowed herself to breathe. She reflected on the rare comfort of being truly seen, the simple act of someone listening without judgment, without expectation. In a life defined by solitude, that evening had felt like an unexpected shelter, a temporary sanctuary where vulnerability wasn't a liability but a bridge to connection. Madison's chest tightened at the thought, both comforting and unsettling, a reminder of how long she had been living without this kind of human touch. Later that night, as the city hummed softly beyond her window, Madison found herself scrolling through messages on her phone, hesitant yet drawn to the idea of reaching out. The text she composed to Daniel paused and restarted more than once, a reflection of her internal struggle. She worried about overstepping, about exposing too much of herself too soon, but something inside urged her to take the step anyway. The next morning, the city felt different. The streets were no longer entirely oppressive, the air no longer solely cold and indifferent. Madison carried with her a subtle but growing sense of hope, fragile yet persistent. She prepared her coffee with deliberate care, the act itself grounding her, a ritual of self-kindness. The aroma filled the small apartment, a reminder of the fleeting warmth she had experienced the night before. A notification drew her attention. Daniel had responded. His message was simple, thoughtful, and considerate, an acknowledgement of their shared evening. There was no rush, no heavy expectation, only a gentle continuation of the connection they had begun. Madison felt a small thrill, a mixture of relief and excitement, as she typed back a careful, open reply. The conversation unfolded naturally, a dialogue of patience and mutual curiosity, each message building trust, each word reinforcing the fragile bridge between them. Days passed, and Madison found herself anticipating these interactions, cherishing them as small islands of solace in a world that often felt relentless. The connection with Daniel became a thread she could grasp onto, a lifeline in the vast, impersonal expanse of the city. It was more than casual conversation. It was a recognition of shared humanity, of struggles silently carried and slowly revealed. She realized she was beginning to allow herself to be vulnerable again, to trust cautiously but meaningfully. One rainy afternoon, Daniel suggested meeting at a small park with a gazebo, a quiet place removed from the clamor of the streets. Madison arrived, her coat pulled tight against the drizzle, hair damp but spirit unexpectedly buoyed. Daniel was already there, leaning casually against the gazebo railing, holding an umbrella that he offered without a word. It was a small gesture, but it carried the weight of thoughtfulness, a silent acknowledgement of care. They walked together through the park, their conversation meandering effortlessly between shared observations, personal stories, and reflections on life's unpredictable nature. Madison noticed the subtle gestures, how Daniel's eyes softened when he listened, how he mirrored her expressions, how he seemed attuned not just to her words but to the emotions beneath them. It was a rare form of empathy, the kind that penetrates defenses and fosters genuine understanding. At one point, they paused beneath the gazebo as rain-slicked leaves rustled around them. Daniel spoke of moments in his past when he had felt similarly lost, the kind of raw honesty that Madison had rarely encountered. She shared her own experiences cautiously, each revelation a delicate thread woven into the growing tapestry of trust. The shelter of the gazebo, the quiet rhythm of the rain, and the undemanding presence of another person created a cocoon where Madison felt, for the first time in months, a sense of emotional safety. A silence fell, comfortable and unforced. Madison realized she was leaning slightly toward him, drawn not just by proximity but by the rare intimacy of shared vulnerability. Daniel offered a small, reassuring smile, acknowledging without words that the space they occupied together was both fragile and significant. In that moment, Madison recognized the transformative power of connection, not the grand gestures, but the quiet presence, the patient listening, the unspoken understanding. As the rain tapered off, they lingered, reluctant to break the spell of the moment. Madison felt a new awareness blooming within her, the possibility that life could hold unexpected kindness, that trust could be cautiously rebuilt, and that emotional connection could be found even in the most ordinary spaces. It wasn't a solution to the pain she carried, but it was a beginning, a foothold in a world that had long felt overwhelming and isolating. When they finally parted, Madison walked back to her apartment with a lightness she hadn't felt in months. The city lights reflected in puddles on the pavement, mirroring the subtle warmth growing in her chest. She realized that shelter wasn't just a physical place, but also the emotional space cultivated by someone willing to see and accept her as she was. That evening, she sat by her window, sipping tea, reflecting on the day. She felt gratitude, not just for Daniel, but for the small, significant ways human connection could pierce through despair and illuminate even the darkest corners. Madison's phone buzzed with a message, and she smiled softly. Daniel had written something brief, thoughtful, a reminder that he was present, that the connection was real and ongoing. She responded in kind, savoring the subtle back and forth that had become a lifeline of sorts. The city outside continued its relentless pace, but Madison now carried a quiet strength within her, a resilience born not from isolation, but from the courage to allow another into her life, to share her story, and to receive compassion in return. That night, as she prepared for sleep, Madison placed her hand over her chest and took a deep breath. She reflected on how far she had come from the despair that had once seemed insurmountable. The journey wasn't complete, the scars remained, but the foundation of hope had been laid. She whispered to herself, maybe shelter isn't just a place, it's a person who reminds you that you're not alone. Madison's life began to shift in unexpected ways. The bond she had started to form with Daniel was evolving, and she sensed that the next step would involve meeting the people who shaped him, the family that had been a silent presence in his life, quietly influencing his choices and his values. She had anticipated nerves, uncertainty, and the subtle anxiety that accompanies every encounter with someone else's world. The morning she was to meet Daniel's family, Madison woke with a fluttering heart. She meticulously chose her outfit, wanting to strike a balance between casual comfort and respectful presentation. The city outside was alive with its usual rush, but inside her apartment, time seemed to stretch, each minute filled with both anticipation and doubt. She rehearsed greetings and polite phrases, trying to imagine how she would introduce herself, how she would navigate the nuances of first impressions. Daniel arrived to pick her up, his presence grounding yet thrilling. He offered a reassuring smile, sensing the tension she tried to mask. "They're going to love you," he said, his voice carrying a calm certainty that contrasted with the storm of thoughts in her mind. Madison nodded, swallowing her apprehension, drawing courage from his confidence. The drive to his family's home was quiet but comforting, punctuated by small, familiar exchanges that reminded Madison of the ease of their connection. Pulling up to the suburban house, Madison felt her heart quicken. The home was unassuming but welcoming, a reflection of a family that seemed grounded in warmth rather than pretension. Daniel guided her to the door, knocking gently. The door swung open to reveal Daniel's mother, a woman with a gentle smile and kind eyes that immediately put Madison at ease. She was followed by Daniel's father, whose reserved demeanor carried a quiet strength, and by his younger sister, full of youthful energy and curiosity. Introductions were made, each one punctuated by genuine warmth. Madison offered a soft smile, extending her hand to meet theirs, feeling the subtle mix of curiosity and scrutiny that accompanies any first meeting. She quickly realized that the family dynamic was layered, each person possessing unique traits that interplayed in ways both visible and subtle. The mother exuded nurturing confidence, the father a steady, reassuring presence, and the sister a playful, teasing energy that hinted at a close-knit bond built on years of shared experience. Over lunch, Madison observed the interactions, noting the ease with which they communicated, the inside jokes that flew effortlessly between them, the unspoken rules that guided their behavior. She felt like an observer and a participant simultaneously, navigating the delicate dance of inclusion while maintaining her authenticity. Daniel held her hand subtly under the table, a quiet anchor, reassuring her that she belonged in this space, even as the currents of unfamiliarity swirled around her. Conversation flowed, gradually shifting from polite small talk to more personal stories. Madison shared fragments of her own life, carefully selected to reveal vulnerability without overexposure. The family responded with interest and empathy, their questions thoughtful, their laughter genuine. Daniel's mother asked about her childhood, his father about her career, and his sister about her hobbies and interests. Each inquiry was delivered with the warmth of someone invested not only in the moment, but in truly knowing her. As the afternoon progressed, Madison began to sense the subtle judgments fading, replaced by authentic curiosity and acceptance. Daniel's family had a rhythm, a way of making space for newcomers without diminishing their own closeness. They included her in stories of Daniel's childhood, playful recollections that painted him in both humorous and tender light. Madison laughed at his antics, feeling the walls around her heart soften with each shared anecdote, each mutual smile. The family's home revealed layers of Daniel's world that he had not yet articulated. Photographs adorned the walls, capturing moments of celebration, growth, and ordinary life. Madison studied them closely, noticing patterns, the importance of tradition, of connection, of shared experience. She realized that meeting Daniel's family was not just about introductions. It was an immersion into the foundation of the man she was growing to care about, the values that guided him, and the people who had shaped his perspective. Later, Daniel's father led them to the backyard, where a small garden flourished under meticulous care. The quiet serenity of the space contrasted with the bustling city beyond the property line. Madison felt a sense of peace, a momentary pause from the relentless pace of life. Conversations turned reflective, touching on dreams, aspirations, and challenges faced. The family's openness encouraged Madison to reveal parts of herself she had often kept hidden, a mixture of professional ambition, personal struggles, and moments of quiet doubt. By evening, the initial tension had dissolved completely. Madison felt a sense of belonging she had not anticipated, a warmth that extended beyond the surface politeness of etiquette. Daniel's family had woven her into their narrative, not as a guest, but as someone who could potentially become part of their ongoing story. She realized that emotional connection was not just about the bond between two people, but about the networks of relationships that provided context, support, and belonging. Before leaving, Daniel's mother pressed a gentle hand against hers. "You're welcome here anytime," she said, her words carrying sincerity and care. Madison's chest swelled with emotion, gratitude, relief, and the burgeoning sense that life could be more expansive than she had allowed herself to believe. Daniel squeezed her hand, sharing a silent acknowledgement that they were navigating uncharted yet promising territory together. As they drove back through the city streets, Madison reflected on the day. The encounter with Daniel's family had revealed the potential for deeper intimacy, not just with Daniel, but with the life he inhabited, the routines, the values, the connections that defined him. It was an introduction to a world that could support love, trust, and shared growth, provided she continued to navigate it with care and authenticity. Madison felt the weight of isolation lifting slightly, replaced by the promise of inclusion and emotional safety. The experience underscored a vital truth. Relationships were never just about the individual connection. They were interwoven with the lives and stories of those around them. By embracing this complexity, Madison found herself both challenged and inspired, a sense of hope quietly blooming within her. That night, back in her apartment, she penned a few lines in her journal, capturing the day's experiences, the laughter, the stories, the subtle gestures of acceptance. Her thoughts lingered on the small acts of kindness that had defined the visit. The mother's gentle encouragement, the father's respectful listening, the sister's playful teasing. Each moment had been a thread, stitching her into the fabric of a family's world, making her feel seen, respected, and quietly cherished. Madison's phone buzzed with a message from Daniel, a simple "hope you enjoyed today" accompanied by a smiley face emoji. She responded immediately, the warmth of the day still radiating through her words. The connection between them felt stronger now, fortified not only by shared experience, but by the embrace of the people who mattered most to him. As she prepared for sleep, Madison reflected on how unexpected encounters could ripple outward, affecting not just immediate interactions, but the broader landscape of one's emotional life. Meeting Daniel's family had been more than a polite obligation. It had been a revelation, a glimpse into the interconnectedness of trust, affection, and belonging. For the first time in a long while, Madison felt a sense of hope that extended beyond herself, touching the world around her and the possibilities that lay ahead. After the visit with Daniel's family, Madison found herself lingering on the day's experiences long after she returned home. The warmth, the laughter, the genuine acceptance she had felt, it all contrasted sharply with the isolation and distrust she had carried for so long. It was as if a small, bright light had been ignited inside her, illuminating corners of her heart that had remained shadowed for years. She realized that healing was not instantaneous, but this experience had provided the first flickers of possibility, a glimpse that connection and belonging could exist even after disappointment and pain. In the following days, Madison and Daniel spent more time together, each meeting deepening their emotional intimacy. Morning coffee in quiet cafes, long walks through tree-lined streets, and evenings sharing favorite music at Daniel's apartment became the fabric of their shared life. Madison discovered that vulnerability was not weakness, but a bridge to authentic connection. She could voice her fears and insecurities without judgment, and Daniel responded with empathy and unwavering support. Each conversation, each touch, each quiet shared glance was a gentle stitch mending the frayed edges of her spirit. One afternoon, as the late autumn sun spilled golden light across the city streets, Madison found herself recounting experiences she had rarely spoken of aloud. Childhood disappointments, moments of loss, the subtle betrayals that had shaped her perceptions of trust. Each confession was met with understanding, never pity. Daniel listened intently, his presence a steady reassurance. He asked thoughtful questions, not to probe for weakness, but to honor her story and validate her feelings. Madison felt a weight lifting from her shoulders, an almost imperceptible release of tension that had accumulated over years of emotional guarding. Their shared journey extended beyond emotional exchange to practical support. Daniel encouraged Madison to pursue projects she had shelved for fear of failure, to take small steps toward dreams she had long neglected. Together, they explored art galleries, revisited favorite childhood landmarks, and volunteered at local community initiatives. Through these shared experiences, Madison recognized the subtle ways belonging and purpose were intertwined. Healing was not merely emotional, it was experiential, found in the rhythm of daily life, the act of creation, and the reciprocity of care. Evenings became a sacred time, moments to reflect on the day, share thoughts, and simply exist in the comfort of each other's company. Madison learned to appreciate the silence between words, the reassurance of proximity, and the unspoken affirmation of presence. She realized that love was not always dramatic or declarative. It could be quiet, steadfast, and transformative, its impact measured not in grand gestures but in consistency and attentiveness. One particularly rainy evening, Madison and Daniel stayed in, watching the city through fogged-up windows. The sound of rain on the glass became a backdrop for conversation that wove through hopes, regrets, and aspirations. Madison found herself revealing fears about her career, the lingering doubts that had kept her from fully trusting herself and others. Daniel responded with patience, sharing moments from his own life when he had felt uncertain or afraid. They laughed, cried, and held space for one another, each moment reinforcing the sense that they were navigating life as a partnership rather than as isolated individuals. Madison also began to notice changes in herself beyond her emotional landscape. She slept more peacefully, her mind less burdened by ruminations of past disappointments. She smiled more freely, laughed more spontaneously, and engaged with her surroundings with a curiosity that had long lain dormant. Healing, she realized, was not a single epiphany but a series of gentle awakenings, small revelations that collectively restored vitality and hope. Daniel's support extended to her interactions with others as well. Friends and colleagues noted the change in Madison's demeanor, the subtle confidence in her stride, the ease with which she now navigated social encounters. She found herself reaching out to others with renewed empathy, offering encouragement and support, reflecting the care she had received. Each act of giving and receiving nurtured the sense that she belonged not just with Daniel, but within a broader community capable of acceptance and understanding. Together, they confronted challenges that surfaced unexpectedly. Miscommunications, moments of doubt, and lingering insecurities tested the strength of their connection. Yet, each time they faced difficulty, they approached it as a team, using honesty, compassion, and patience to navigate obstacles. Madison learned that belonging was not about perfection or the absence of conflict. It was about finding security in the knowledge that someone would stand by her through uncertainty, disappointment, and growth. Over time, Madison's sense of self began to expand. She no longer defined herself solely through past hurt or fear. Instead, She saw the potential for resilience, love, and meaningful contribution. Her interactions with Daniel and his family continued to reinforce this perspective, providing a support network that validated her existence and encouraged her aspirations. She realized that healing was deeply relational, intertwined with the trust, respect, and care she experienced with those who truly valued her presence. One evening, while walking through a quiet park with leaves crunching beneath their feet, Madison paused, feeling the weight of gratitude settle over her. She turned to Daniel, her eyes glistening with emotion. "I didn't realize how much I needed this, how much I needed us," she whispered. Daniel smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face, the warmth of his hand a grounding force. "We're finding our way together," he replied softly, "and you're not alone anymore." The sense of belonging extended to small, intimate rituals they developed, shared breakfasts, weekend hikes, and evenings spent in quiet reflection or lively discussion. Each ritual carried significance, embedding trust and affection into the routine of daily life. Madison began to understand that stability and belonging were cultivated through consistency, care, and the small choices made each day to honor one another. Through their growing intimacy, Madison also confronted and began to release lingering self-doubt. She started journaling regularly, capturing reflections on personal growth, insights from their experiences, and the subtle ways her perspective was shifting. These writings became a mirror, revealing not only her emotional progress, but also the transformative power of connection, empathy, and unconditional support. By embracing both vulnerability and strength, Madison discovered a newfound sense of purpose. She became more confident in asserting her needs, expressing her feelings, and pursuing her passions without fear of judgment. Healing and belonging were not destinations, but ongoing processes, each day offering opportunities to deepen connection, practice empathy, and nurture both self and partnership. As weeks turned into months, Madison could feel the quiet, profound changes within herself. She no longer recoiled from emotional intimacy or shied away from meaningful relationships. Instead, she approached life with openness, courage, and the conviction that she deserved care, respect, and love. The partnership she shared with Daniel became a living testament to this transformation, a space where mutual support, empathy, and shared experience could flourish. One late evening, as the city lights twinkled outside their apartment window, Madison reflected on the journey that had led her here. The loneliness, fear, and guardedness of her past seemed distant, softened by the layers of healing she had built alongside Daniel. She felt a sense of quiet triumph, not over others, but over her own limitations and doubts, embracing the freedom that came with belonging and connection. Finally, Madison picked up her phone and sent a heartfelt message to Daniel's mother, expressing gratitude for the warmth and acceptance she had shown. Moments like these reinforced the sense of community, the realization that healing was not solitary, but intertwined with the lives of those who cared enough to support and embrace it. Madison understood that life was richer, more meaningful, and more secure when shared with those who valued and respected one another. In her journal that night, Madison wrote, "I am learning that to heal is to belong, and to belong is to be seen, understood, and cherished. I am no longer afraid of opening my heart because I know it can find safe harbor." These words captured the essence of her transformation, a quiet declaration of hope, resilience, and the enduring power of connection. And in that moment, Madison felt fully present, fully alive, and fully embraced, not just by Daniel, but by a world that had once seemed unyielding, now filled with possibility, warmth, and the promise of lasting emotional refuge. The serenity Madison had been cultivating was abruptly disrupted when a message appeared on her phone one late evening. It was from someone she had long tried to forget, a figure from her past whose presence had been a source of confusion, pain, and betrayal. At first, she hesitated, her fingers hovering over the screen as memories surged unbidden. Old arguments, broken trust, and nights filled with anxiety and doubt. The past she thought she had left behind was suddenly knocking at her door, demanding acknowledgement. Daniel noticed the tension as Madison grew quieter, her eyes distant and lips pressed together. "What's wrong?" he asked gently, placing a reassuring hand on hers. She struggled to form words, the weight of her past threatening to spill into the present. Finally, she whispered, "It's someone from before, someone I thought I'd left behind." Daniel's eyes softened and he squeezed her hand, silently offering strength without prying too deeply. Madison felt a mix of relief and fear, relief in having support, fear in confronting wounds that had never fully healed. The next few days were filled with anxiety and reflection. Madison wrestled internally with the decision of whether to respond or ignore the message. She remembered the mistrust, the manipulation, and the emotional turmoil of those previous encounters. Yet she also recognized that avoidance would not bring closure. It was time to face her past head-on, to reclaim power over her narrative and prevent history from casting a shadow over the life she was building with Daniel. When she finally decided to confront the individual, Madison prepared herself mentally. She outlined boundaries, rehearsed responses, and reminded herself of the inner strength she had cultivated through months of healing. This was not about revenge or lingering resentment. It was about self-respect, closure, and protecting the space she had worked so hard to create. The confrontation was set over a brief phone call, but even the thought made her pulse quicken and her stomach tighten with nerves. The conversation began with a cautious, measured tone. Madison remained calm, though her emotions flickered beneath the surface. She articulated her feelings clearly, expressing the hurt and confusion caused by the past interactions while maintaining composure. For the first time, she witnessed the stark contrast between her former self, timid, reactive, and overwhelmed, and her present self, grounded, assertive, and resilient. She realized that she was no longer a passive participant in her own story. She had become an active agent of her life, capable of establishing boundaries and demanding respect. As the call progressed, Madison listened carefully, gauging sincerity and intentions. She detected both acknowledgement and defensiveness, but she remained focused on her own center, refusing to be drawn into old patterns of blame or guilt. The experience was emotionally taxing, stirring echoes of past fear and uncertainty, yet Madison felt a quiet determination to navigate the encounter with dignity. Each carefully chosen word reinforced her newfound strength, reminding her that healing was as much about confronting the past as it was about embracing the present. After the conversation ended, Madison took a deep breath, the tension gradually leaving her shoulders. She felt a sense of relief, not because the past had changed, but because she had reclaimed control over how it affected her. She realized that confrontation was not about seeking validation from others, but about affirming her own growth, asserting boundaries, and reclaiming peace of mind. This was a defining moment in her journey, a clear demarcation between who she had been and who she had become. Daniel noticed the subtle shift in her demeanor. Over dinner that evening, he observed, "You seem lighter, more yourself." Madison smiled softly, recognizing that he could see what she felt inside. The empowerment, the release, and the quiet triumph of facing fear without succumbing to it. The shared acknowledgement deepened their connection, highlighting the ways trust and support could fortify a bond against external challenges. In the days following, Madison reflected on the encounter, journaling her thoughts and insights. She wrote about fear transformed into courage, anxiety converted into clarity, and vulnerability shaped into resilience. Each entry was a testament to her evolution, a reminder that while the past could revisit her life, it no longer had dominion over her emotions, choices, or sense of self-worth. She felt stronger, more confident, and increasingly capable of navigating life with wisdom born from experience. However, the confrontation also prompted Madison to recognize residual emotional triggers. Certain words, tones, or scenarios momentarily reignited old insecurities. Instead of succumbing to panic or frustration, she employed coping strategies she had developed over months: mindful breathing, reflection, and verbalizing her feelings to Daniel. These practices reinforced the lessons she had learned: that healing is continuous, that self-awareness is critical, and that genuine trust, whether in oneself or in others, requires vigilance and care. Madison also began to see the confrontation as a turning point in her relationship with Daniel. Sharing this experience with him, discussing her fears, and recounting the interaction allowed their emotional bond to deepen. Daniel listened without judgment, offered insights when appropriate, and respected her autonomy in handling the situation. Their partnership became a living example of the principles Madison was embodying: courage, openness, empathy, and mutual support. In addition, Madison realized the confrontation inspired a broader reflection on her life patterns. She identified recurring dynamics that had contributed to past vulnerabilities and considered practical strategies to prevent similar situations in the future. This self-reflection was not self-critical, but constructive, fostering growth and reinforcing the boundaries she had begun to establish. Each realization reinforced her sense of agency, a critical element in both healing and building sustainable relationships. The experience also subtly shifted Madison's perspective on forgiveness. She understood that forgiveness was not necessarily about excusing past harm, but about releasing the grip it held over her present. By confronting the past without letting it dominate her emotions, she achieved a form of internal forgiveness, a liberation that allowed her to engage fully in the present and future without the shadow of unresolved resentment. As the days passed, Madison noticed the transformation manifesting in her daily life. Her interactions with colleagues, friends, and strangers reflected increased confidence, clarity, and emotional equilibrium. She approached challenging situations with composure, navigated conflict with poise, and expressed herself with honesty tempered by empathy. The confrontation had not only closed a chapter of her past, but it also empowered her to live with intentionality and authenticity. One evening, while sharing a quiet walk with Daniel through their neighborhood, Madison reflected aloud, "I never realized how much strength it takes to just face what we've been running from." Daniel nodded, squeezing her hand gently. "And yet here you are, stronger than ever. That's real courage." Madison smiled, recognizing that the courage to confront her past was inseparable from the trust, support, and love she had cultivated in her present life. This confrontation, challenging as it had been, ultimately solidified Madison's sense of self and reinforced her capacity for resilience. She learned that facing the past was not an end in itself, but a pivotal step toward sustained emotional freedom, self-assurance, and deeper connection with those who genuinely valued her. The shadows of history no longer dictated her reactions or eroded her sense of worth. Instead, they became markers of growth, reminders of battles fought and strength reclaimed. By reclaiming her narrative, Madison achieved a new equilibrium, one that blended awareness, acceptance, and empowerment. She carried forward the lessons learned with grace, applying them to both personal and relational contexts. In doing so, she realized that confronting the past was an act of courage, not just for herself, but for the relationships she valued, particularly the one she shared with Daniel. And as the city lights flickered around them that night, Madison felt a profound sense of clarity. The past had been acknowledged, addressed, and released. Her present was secure and filled with warmth, and her future shimmered with possibilities shaped not by fear, but by the confidence, love, and resilience she had cultivated. She knew that life would inevitably present challenges, but she also understood that she possessed the tools, support, and inner strength to meet them with grace. The tension and uncertainty that had once clouded Madison's life began to dissolve, leaving space for clarity and peace. After confronting her past, she felt an unfamiliar lightness, as though a heavy burden had finally been lifted from her shoulders. The sense of fear and doubt that had once dictated her actions was replaced by a quiet confidence, a knowing that she had survived, grown, and was capable of embracing life fully. Each morning now brought a renewed energy, a subtle anticipation for the day's possibilities rather than a lingering dread of unresolved pain. Daniel noticed the transformation immediately. The way Madison moved, spoke, and even smiled carried a newfound strength, a self-assuredness that drew people toward her naturally. Their interactions deepened in intimacy, honesty, and shared joy. No longer were they navigating through shadows of past trauma or unspoken worries. Instead, they were building a partnership grounded in mutual respect, understanding, and love. This emotional alignment created a sense of harmony, making even the simplest moments, like preparing breakfast together or sharing a quiet evening walk, feel meaningful and profound. Madison began to reflect on the journey that had led her here. The trials, the heartbreak, the moments of doubt, all of it had contributed to the person she had become. Rather than dwelling on regrets, she embraced gratitude for the lessons learned and the resilience she had discovered within herself. She understood that triumph was not measured merely by external success or accolades, but by the ability to face adversity, process emotions authentically, and emerge with a sense of self-respect and empowerment. The sense of accomplishment was subtle yet powerful. Madison celebrated small victories daily, responding with calm in difficult situations, setting healthy boundaries, and nurturing relationships without fear of vulnerability. She recognized that acceptance was not about erasing the past, but integrating it into her story with wisdom, allowing it to inform her choices without controlling her emotions. Each decision made with awareness and intention reinforced her personal growth, creating a ripple effect that enhanced every aspect of her life. One afternoon, Madison and Daniel decided to visit the neighborhood park, a place they had frequented during the early days of their relationship. The familiar paths now carried new meaning, symbolizing both continuity and growth. As they walked hand in hand, Madison reflected on how far she had come, from uncertainty and fear to trust and confidence. She felt a sense of triumph that was both internal and external. Internal because she had mastered her emotions and healed old wounds. External because her life now reflected the stability, love, and joy she had always sought. Community connections also began to flourish. Madison found herself more willing to engage with friends, neighbors, and colleagues, her interactions marked by empathy, understanding, and an openness that had previously been difficult for her. People responded to this authenticity, drawn to her warmth and strength. Madison realized that the triumph she felt was not hers alone. It radiated outward, touching lives and creating meaningful connections that enriched her world. As she reflected further, Madison understood that acceptance was multidimensional. She accepted her past, embracing the experiences that had shaped her without allowing them to dictate her present. She accepted herself, recognizing her imperfections, strengths, and capacity for growth. And she accepted the love and support of those around her, including Daniel, appreciating that true partnership required both vulnerability and trust. This holistic acceptance provided a foundation for lasting peace, joy, and resilience. The emotional growth she experienced manifested in practical ways as well. Madison approached challenges with measured calm, no longer reacting impulsively or succumbing to anxiety. She handled professional responsibilities with clarity and focus, communicated effectively in personal relationships, and made decisions rooted in insight rather than fear. This maturity reinforced her sense of empowerment, allowing her to navigate life's complexities with confidence and grace. One evening, Madison sat by the window, gazing at the city skyline as dusk painted the sky in shades of gold and violet. She reflected on the journey, acknowledging both the hardships and the triumphs. Each obstacle had tested her, yet each had also strengthened her resolve. She felt gratitude for the journey, understanding that triumph was not simply the absence of struggle, but the conscious choice to rise above it, integrating every lesson and emerging stronger, wiser, and more self-assured. Daniel joined her quietly, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "You've changed," he said softly. "Not in ways anyone else could see, but in ways that matter most." Madison leaned into him, feeling the depth of connection and mutual respect between them. She realized that acceptance was intertwined with love, self-love, love for others, and the ability to trust that relationships could thrive when nurtured with honesty and care. Together, they began to envision a future unburdened by past mistakes. Plans were made, goals were set, and dreams, once dormant, started to resurface with vibrant clarity. Madison felt a renewed sense of purpose, not defined by external validation, but guided by an internal compass shaped by resilience, courage, and emotional intelligence. Every decision was imbued with intention, every interaction strengthened by presence, and every challenge approached with calm determination. Madison's triumph also inspired reflection on forgiveness, both for herself and for others. She recognized that holding onto resentment or guilt would only hinder her growth. By choosing acceptance, she freed herself from the constraints of past anger and disappointment, opening space for healing, compassion, and authentic connection. This emotional liberation allowed her to fully inhabit her life, engage deeply with those she loved, and pursue aspirations without fear of failure or judgment. Over time, Madison noticed that her newfound strength and acceptance influenced others in subtle but meaningful ways. Friends confided in her, seeking guidance and support. Colleagues respected her insights and integrity. Even casual encounters reflected a recognition of her calm confidence and approachable warmth. Triumph, she realized, was not about domination or winning over others. It was about mastering oneself, cultivating authenticity, and radiating strength in a way that uplifted those around her. As the days turned into weeks, Madison embraced a sense of equilibrium. The turbulence that had once dominated her life became a distant memory, replaced by a life characterized by balance, intention, and joy. She had learned that true triumph was not the absence of hardship, but the ability to navigate it with grace, resilience, and unwavering self-respect. This understanding allowed her to engage fully in life, embracing each moment with awareness, curiosity, and hope. The journey culminated in a quiet, reflective moment between Madison and Daniel. Sitting together on a park bench as the sun dipped below the horizon, they held hands in comfortable silence. Madison felt an overwhelming sense of completion, not because life was perfect, but because she had achieved mastery over her emotions, her fears, and her past. She understood that acceptance was a continuous process, yet it was one she could now navigate with confidence and serenity. Madison smiled, a mixture of relief, pride, and joy washing over her. Triumph was not a singular event, but a series of choices, actions, and reflections that led her to a place of self-possession and peace. Acceptance was not passive resignation, but an active embrace of reality, guided by insight, courage, and love. And in that moment, she knew that her life was no longer defined by what had happened to her, but by how she chose to live, love, and grow moving forward. With Daniel by her side and a renewed sense of purpose in her heart, Madison stepped into the future with clarity, strength, and hope. She was no longer held hostage by fear or past mistakes. Every interaction, every decision, and every moment reflected a triumph of spirit, a declaration that she was fully present, fully alive and fully in control of her narrative. Her journey had taught her that true victory lay not in circumstances or outcomes, but in mastering the inner world, embracing challenges, and cultivating meaningful relationships. And as she looked toward tomorrow, Madison felt an unshakable conviction. She was capable of anything, equipped with resilience, wisdom, and a heart open to the beauty of life yet to come. As the sun rose on a new day, Madison sat quietly on the porch, a cup of coffee warming her hands, her mind tracing the path that had brought her to this moment. She thought of every challenge, every heartbreak, and every moment of doubt, realizing how each had been a stepping stone, guiding her toward clarity, resilience, and strength. The journey had been arduous, yet it had revealed the depth of her courage and the unyielding power of hope. She reflected on the relationships that had shaped her, the support of friends, the quiet understanding of Daniel, and even the lessons learned from the conflicts and confrontations of the past. Each connection had contributed to her growth, teaching her patience, empathy, and the importance of trust. Madison understood that life was richer and more meaningful when shared with others who truly saw and valued the real her, imperfections and all. There was a profound sense of gratitude in her heart. Gratitude for the struggles that had tested her, gratitude for the love that had healed her, and gratitude for the future, now wide open with possibilities. She realized that every moment of despair had been temporary, every setback a lesson, and every triumph a reminder of her inner strength. Acceptance had become her guiding principle, not complacency, but conscious acknowledgement of life as it was, with courage to shape it into what she desired. Turning to Daniel, Madison felt an overwhelming warmth. "We've come so far," she said softly, her voice trembling with emotion. He smiled, holding her hand gently, acknowledging the shared journey they had navigated together. There was no need for grand declarations. Their presence in each other's lives spoke louder than words. It was a bond strengthened through challenges, honesty, and unwavering support, a love grounded in respect, trust, and emotional depth. Madison's eyes scanned the horizon, contemplating the people who might be watching her story unfold, the viewers who had witnessed her journey. She imagined them struggling with their own challenges, wondering if they, too, could find hope and courage amidst uncertainty. Her message was clear. Strength is not born from perfection or ease, but from persistence, resilience, and the willingness to face fear and vulnerability. Each person has the power to rise, to heal, and to embrace life fully. In a gentle, heartfelt tone, she addressed them directly. "No matter what you're going through, know that you are not alone. Every struggle carries a lesson, every tear shapes your strength, and every small step forward is a triumph. Take the time to honor yourself, to acknowledge your resilience, and to surround yourself with those who lift you up. Your journey is yours, and you have the power to write its next chapter." Madison paused, letting the weight of her words settle, realizing that vulnerability could be a source of strength rather than shame. Sharing her story wasn't about seeking sympathy. It was about inspiring courage, validating emotions, and reminding others that healing and growth are possible for everyone. Life may not be perfect, but it can be meaningful, rewarding, and rich with connection if we choose to embrace it fully. She added softly, "If my story has touched you, even in the smallest way, take a moment to reach out, share your experiences, and connect with someone who needs encouragement. Comment below with your thoughts, your triumphs, or even your struggles. Together, we can create a community of support, understanding, and hope, because no one should have to face life's challenges alone." Madison felt a deep sense of fulfillment as she spoke. The call to action was not just for the viewers, but for herself as well. A reminder to remain engaged, compassionate, and present, both in her own life and in the lives of those around her. Connection, she realized, was the heartbeat of triumph and acceptance. Sharing her story created bridges for others, offering them a hand to hold, a voice to listen, and a perspective that healing and joy are attainable. As she concluded, Madison reflected on the profound lessons of her journey: the importance of resilience, the transformative power of love, and the necessity of embracing one's past without allowing it to define the future. Triumph was not a destination, but a continuous process of growth, understanding, and conscious choice. Acceptance was not passive but active, an ongoing commitment to self-love, empathy, and the courage to face life's uncertainties with grace. She smiled, feeling the peace she had worked so hard to achieve. "Life is a series of moments, each with its own challenges and rewards," she said softly. "Celebrate the small victories, honor the lessons of the past, and never underestimate the power of hope and love. You have everything you need within yourself to rise above difficulties and embrace the life you deserve." Madison's story ended not with a period, but with an open space, a promise of new beginnings, growth, and the enduring power of human resilience. She looked out at the world with a heart full of hope, knowing that her journey, while uniquely hers, could inspire countless others to find their own courage, acceptance, and triumph. The final thought lingered. Life's challenges are inevitable, but so too is the strength within each of us to overcome them. Through vulnerability, honesty, and connection, we can transform struggle into growth, fear into courage, and despair into hope. And in doing so, we create a life not defined by hardship, but by resilience, love, and the unwavering belief in the possibility of joy.